So one of the key lessons of this class is called the other side. So if I turn my name tag over, I've got this little symbol that we're going to call the other side. Quite a bit to our class. So hope you're doing all right. Let's go to the other side. I know that sounds like a horror movie, and it is. So if you want to watch the trailer for that horror movie called The Other Side, go ahead and get scared. But this is scarier. Actually, it's way more fun. So probably in a way, the most common teaching from class that's integrated into the signature paper is this section called The Other Side. Remember, key question to class, who is Jesus in Matthew? Think about all the answers to who Jesus might be. Have you ever said anything like, he's the one who's not afraid to go to the other side? Remember back in the genealogy when we said who's Jesus in Matthew? He's not ashamed to have outcasts in his family trees. He's not afraid of the sexually suspect. Remember that? So who's Jesus in Matthew? He's not afraid to go to the other side. So already think about a case study you might have already picked in your mind. A classic one would be the woman with the sign on the freeway. If Jesus helps this woman, however you decide or discern he might help her, he's not afraid to go to the other side. Literally the other side of the streets, so the other side of the tracks. So here's the sign for the other side, and it'll show up on the quiz as well. This is a very, very simplified map of the Sea of Galilee, the lake actually that Jesus walked on. You'll be learning a lot about that, but here's a very oversimplified sign that'll help you remember the whole idea of the other side. More or less on the northwest corner of the lake, there are a cluster of three pretty small cities: Capernaum, Chorazim. Sometimes we spell that with a C like your book does, but just to have some different letters here, I'll go with an alternate spelling. Chorazim and Bethsaida. So in a way, this is what Jesus and his Jewish homeboys would call the good side of the lake, the religious side of the lake, the safe side of the lake. In fact, they often call this cluster of pretty conservative Jewish cities the Orthodox Triangle, or the Jewish Triangle. Well, the whole idea, if you're Jewish, you pretty much wanted to stay on that side, because if you crossed over the sea to the other side, you'd all of a sudden be not in Jewish territory, but in Gentile territory, and in some circles, they even called it devil's territory. So here's the oversimplified map of the Sea of Galilee. There's the northwest side, more or less, with a cluster of Jewish cities, the good side, so-called, Capernaum, Chorazim, Bethsaida. But over on the other side, you've got the opposite of the so-called good side. You've got, over here, they often talked about 10 cities. Over here, 3 smaller cities, villages kind of we might call it, but over here there's 10 cities. Decapolis literally means 10 cities. Deca, 10. Polis, like police, political, 10 cities. So it's helpful to remember over here is the 3 small cities, over here is the 10 bigger pagan cities, 10 pagan cities. And they also called this the area of the 7 nations, but what kind? Pagan nations. Nowadays we might say like that. So think about where you live. I live in Fresno. When I teach in Visalia, I often hear a traditional answer to that. Think about, for your city, where is the other side of the tracks? Here in Fresno, we often talk about a tale of 2 cities. You've got north of Shaw and south of Shaw. Sometimes in your city, the tracks literally divide the town, and it's a lower class, lower caste. So here's the oversimplified idea. The Jesus and the disciples tend to hang out on the Jewish, the good side, but very often he took them, sometimes against their will, to the other side of the lake where the so-called evil people lived, the non-Jewish people, the dirty people they weren't even supposed to touch according to some traditions, very important. Here's the catch. Every time they went across the lake, so many times the phrase, the other side, shows up in Matthew. Jesus says, dudes, we're going to go to the other side. And they're like, no, you can't do that. If you think of lakes, sea, beach here in California, what's the vibe you get for the sea, the lake, the beach? It's a good vibe. But in Jesus' historical world, the lake water was a symbol of evil, even hell. You may have heard the phrase abyss. It's like a watery hell. So Jesus and the good guys are often going over to the other side to minister or help the so-called evil, dirty people. And here's the catch: they had to go across the lake, which was a symbol or a sign of evil anyway, to get there. Don't be afraid, Jesus says, to go to the other side.